Hello, and welcome back to Colonel O'Truth's Miniature Issues. We've reached the top of Cloister Lane, and we're heading out onto Pipistrelle Street, a row of houses and a precarious boardwalk, not for the faint-hearted, far above the rest of Undercrag City. Also in this video, look out for an exciting moment 14 minutes in, where Mrs. O'Truth and I finally learned how to film in 4K. Thank you Geek Gaming Scenics and Miniac for your excellent tutorials. This is Undercrag City. Pipistrelle Street will sit above the sluice gatekeeper's house, protruding from the cliff face far above the aqueduct and the water wheel. I'm starting with a piece of black foam core on which I've marked out the shape of the street and the cliff that it will sit on. Next, I sketch a rough outline for my rocky protrusion and cut the foam core at an angle. I'm going to build this up in 2 or 3 layers. I mark out a footpath and the rough locations of where I think my buildings will be. Now a second piece, shaped to fit over the first, extending the rock face outwards and upwards in a gentle incline. Mark out my street again. And I've ended up with 4 pieces glued together. Now it's time to peel off the paper where I want my stonework. A few of you have commented that you find it difficult to get foam board that will peel easily. The best advice I can give you is buy the cheapest stuff possible. As it's less well made, it falls apart better. I've cut my steps, and I'm drawing my stonework. As the shape develops, I've decided I need to build up some more support. But just a few offcuts, glued in place, and then cut into shape. It doesn't have to look pretty. Now some layers of 30mm foam. I'm hacking up the side and pulling it apart with my thumb. This gives an instant rocky appearance. Plenty of PVA. And I've got my framework. And I'll just check how that's going to look in place. So now I have to start planning my buildings. This is my usual black card and my usual process for a Tudor-style timber frame building. Marking out doors and windows. I'll eventually have 3 buildings here, but I'll really only need to detail the fronts. That looks pretty good, but it needs to follow a bend. So I've scored between the 2 buildings, and I'm gluing an angled piece of card in place to make it all nice and solid. Using good quality builder's PVA, this card sets very, very quickly. I don't have to waste much time waiting for things to dry. Glue pot for extra support. And it doesn't take long before I've got the structure for the 3 houses. Now for the detailing. 2mm strips of thin balsa wood. Starting as always with the main horizontals. There are some distinct structural differences between the 3 houses, so it's clear where one ends and the next begins. Matchsticks for extra chunky support. And some longer pieces to hold a balcony. Now some small supports. I'm cutting the end of each piece at roughly 45 degrees and pushing it into place. While I'm messing around with all these tiny pieces of wood, it's a good opportunity to remind you that if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do. I really appreciate your support, and please also leave comments and questions. I answer every single one, and I really enjoy hearing from you. Now we come to the balcony. These are strips of basswood, not balsa. Thin balsa is a little fragile for this kind of thing. With my structure in place, I can put some balsa wood planks over the top. The faithful pointy stick is getting a lot of work today. I'll let that dry. And move on to some doors. These are simple rectangles of balsa wood, and I'm drawing planks in freehand with a pencil. A generous helping of PVA, and in goes the door. As usual, I'm trying to leave a tiny gap at the bottom for the light of my LEDs to spill out. Then it's back to the balcony to build a handrail. Once again, this is basswood. I've been asked before why I don't use tweezers for this kind of thing. Fact is, I just don't get on with them. I find they amplify the shaking of my hands. Anyway, I find with patience and a pointy stick, you can achieve almost anything. Finally, for the structure, I'm going to need a piece of roof. This is paper from a sketch pad, soaked with water and then black ink, to make it sag. I decided to include this roof to tie in the colour scheme of these buildings to the ones below them. The orange tiles throughout the city are a strong characteristic. These tiles are 6mm long, 3mm wide, cut from a cat food packet. And then I just lie them on, one at a time, making sure they overlap. I've also built up the rock roof with clay, painted it dark grey, and now I'm ruining my dark grey with my light grey undercoat for the buildings. And while that's drying, it's time for some clay work. I want to disguise all of the joins, but I also want to keep some of the craggy rock appearance of the foam. I'm keeping the clay malleable with PVA and working it with a brush and my fingers. Then all of my stone gets a dark grey base coat. I've had to be careful to leave the bottom and sides flat where they're going to join the rest of the model. I'll blend these in later. This dry brushing technique is always so satisfying. The stone really comes to life. Light grey over all of the dark grey. And then white. I'm being quite heavy-handed. Now we come to the fun part. The suspended boardwalk. I've marked some matchsticks for length and sharpened the ends. I'm pushing them into the model up to my mark. I'm spacing these roughly equidistant, gradually working my way around and up the cliff face so that my boardwalk curls around and up. I've added more matchsticks up above to form supports. Now using basswood, I'm creating runners. I'll work my way from one matchstick to the next, building up my structure. At this point, I have no idea how this is going to look. I've never done this before. I'm just making it up as I go along. And when my structure is good and solid, more balsa wood planks. The balsa wood isn't as strong as the basswood, but it has a nicer texture when it's painted. I'm following more or less the same process I did with the balcony. Here are my basswood uprights. I changed my mind. I had them glued on top of the planks. Now I've gone with gluing them to the side of the structure. It's a more logical approach. I think the builders of Undercrag would have gone this way. And now my handrail. Again, short sections following the line of the boardwalk. And we're done. With the boardwalk and handrails complete, I've painted them with neat brown ink, and now I'm adding glue and sand to give me an earthy texture. And more on the cliff face. These will become mosses and dirt. I've painted the dirt brown, and now I'm dry brushing all of my timber work with a pale yellow. Again, I'm being fairly heavy-handed here. Remembering to get underneath as well. This is so far above Undercrag City, it'll be easy to see what's going on. After the yellow, a white. And then the same treatment for the buildings. These were painted light grey earlier and then completely coated with brown ink. I'm using a large brush for some fairly heavy dry brushing, focusing on the panels. Light yellow again on all of the dirt patches. And now all of my woodwork gets brown ink again. Being a translucent ink, as this dries, all of that highlighting will come through, resulting in a lovely wood texture. I find this a very satisfying process. I hope you enjoy watching it too. And now for the buildings. Picking out all of the timber. Remembering not just to get the faces of the timbers, but down all of the little sides as well. And now my rust ink on my tiles. A couple of people have commented that these colours look very saturated. These actually are the colours. I wanted Undercrag to be quite a bright place. Now some tiny pieces of thin black card for my door hardware. The glue will take care of itself, it shrinks as it dries. A touch of silver paint. A touch of rust ink. And you can see I've also added my acetate behind the windows. That's an acetate sheet obscured with Mod Podge on both sides. And with the painting done, it's time to glue the two pieces together. Now to hide the joins. More red Das clay, squished into place with a brush. And I need some doorsteps. This is my modelling card again, cut into small pieces, with a tiny bit of carving to make it look like flagstones. Time to disguise all of my joins, more sand. The sand's been painted brown and highlighted. The rock face has been painted grey, and I'm going to put some supports under my balcony. Some solid pliers there rather than tweezers. They give a much better grip. I like the weight of them. Happy with that? Let's move on to the ropes. I've stripped some electrical wire and taken a few strands of copper twisted together to make my rope. Now I'm shaping loops at the end of each using a piece of matchstick. This needs to be fairly precise as I want my ropes to look like they're taut. They wouldn't look saggy. I've poured out a blob of superglue onto a brass sheet. And I'm reinforcing the wires all the way up and down. When that's dry, a light grey undercoat. Like most of what I do, this is just acrylic house paint from a test pot. No expensive modelling paints here. I wasn't really sure what colour my ropes would be in the end, but the undercoat is a start. Try some brown ink. maybe I want them to be lighter. A pale yellow dry brush. No, let's go back to brown ink again. With all of that done, all of my stone gets a thin black wash. As usual, this is 1 part ink to 16 parts water. It looks very black, but it'll fade as it dries. And while it's still wet, all of the sand that I want to be moss gets a little bit of green ink, which is then washed out with yellow. And a thin brown wash over the earth, 1 part ink to 4 parts water. This is starting to look quite special. Now a few blobs of PVA on my earthy sections. And some static grass. Just sprinkling it liberally in. I'll let that dry. Now I'm going to be uncharacteristically precise. This won't look right if it's not level. So I've glued in some supports. Now that only a small section of what I've built will actually touch the model below, I'm using plenty of PVA, but also a few drops of superglue to hold the model in place while it has time to dry. There. Now leave it alone. I'm building up the join between the new piece and the rest of the city with more red clay. Some of this is going over work I've done before, but that's just normal for this project. Here you can see the top of Cloister Lane, where it meets Pipistrelle Street. There's a bit of blending work to do here. Disguising the joins in the stonework. And shaping the ground. More sand. And more dark grey paint, hiding my joins, and dry brushing, and ink washes, and a carefully placed cloth to protect the rest of the city. As one wash runs into the next, new tones are created. Finally, more flowers and grass. You can also see I've cut away a section of the roof above Cloister Lane. It's time to build up the rock wall, where Cloister Lane and Pipistrelle Street join and disappear inside Undercrag Mountain. I'm using the grey clay here that I discovered a few weeks ago, decided I liked, and then decided I didn't like. I still don't like it, but this is such a fiddly little area that it's going to be easier to get my colours right, as the grey is fairly similar to my grey paint. Now a big slab of rock. I've hacked this foam apart in the same manner as before, random slashes with a knife and lots of pulling it apart with my thumb. I've added patches of sand and grey paint, and I'm highlighting it as before. I'll be working over some of this again with clay and so on, but I like to get each piece almost finished because you never really know where the very tricky bits are going to be, so it's handy if you've already got paint in there. Anyway, my rock roof is glued in place, and while it's drying, I'm going to add my LEDs inside the buildings. I've wired these and shoved them through pieces of foam board, just little offcuts. Now I'm poking their feeds through black card and closing off the buildings. Now a quick lighting test. Back to my rock roof. Red clay again. The grey is just too hard to work with. The red is much smoother. Dark grey paint, highlighting, black wash, green, yellow, and there we are, Pipistrelle Street, high above Undercrag City. That walkway is going to lead on to something else in a little while, so please keep watching. In the meantime, there's still a lot more to do on Undercrag City. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you next time. Bye for now.